very warm welcome to this Othello revision session. I'm Wardle, and in this 60-minute session we will be exploring everything you need to know about Othello, of course William Shakespeare's great play, all through the lens, if you like, of love through the ages. We're going to be exploring the play as a perspective, as a presentation of love. We're going to be asking, what was Shakespeare trying to tell us about love, about relationships, about passion, about jealousy, about these key themes in that world of love through his play Othello? So we're going to be taking a look at the key characters, we're going to look at the key scenes, we're going to look at the key context and the key critical ideas about this play, which is still very popular, still performed today, hundreds of years after it was written, and be asking, what is Shakespeare trying to tell us? How is he using his characters as a vehicle, as a tool to present a certain message, to present a certain meaning to the world on that theme of love? Now, this play has had massive success, and many critics do think that is because it focuses on a very universal theme, love. So let me take you back in time to the 1600s, when experts think that Shakespeare wrote Othello in about 1603, so at the very beginning of the 1600s. And this was at the end of the Elizabethan era. And the first performance of Othello took place in what's then known as the Jacobean era. It was when James I came to the throne, and we believe that one of the very first performances of Othello was for James I. So it was sort of at the end of that Elizabethan era, at the dawn of the Jacobean era. And the key context, of course, we need to know is it starts off by being set in Venice. So I want to transport you to Venice, and I want you to imagine what it was like in the 1600s in Venetian society, because this was a devoutly Christian society. It was a very civilized place. It was the pinnacle of Christian civilization. So everybody followed the correct customs and rules. There was that devout belief and respect in God. Women were oppressed. This is what we know as a patriarchal society in which the men held the power. So within the government, it was men, it was the kings and the lords leading the countries. Within the homes, it was the fathers as the figurehead. So women were seen as those second-class citizens. It was men in the house, in the home, and then in the government and the leadership structures who were leading. So, for example, a wealthy man's daughter would be expected to stay at home. She wouldn't have an education, outside of the home. She'd be taught to be a good, what we might see today as a housewife, as a domestic goddess, if you like, and then she would be married off to a wealthy man who she would then become effectively the possession of. So women were very restricted in what they could do. And it was this heavily civilized but structured society. There were very clear expectations about how you should be presented, how you should behave, what you should be doing, and when you should be doing it. There was a lot of oppression, not really an acceptance of difference. So anybody who was black, for example, who clearly was not born in Venice, they would have been seen as an outsider. So there was quite an us and them mentality. It was all about being part of the ruling class, if you like, of being part of the establishment, and anyone that didn't conform to that didn't have power. They were treated as an outsider, and they were seen with suspicion, because these were not times when it was all happy around the world. Let me tell you, there was a lot of war, there was a lot of barbarity, and so anybody that didn't conform to that Christian civilized notion of what people should be like in Venice was treated with suspicion. And anybody that might have come from a heritage of far away, so imagine Venice in Europe, so anyone from Africa or far away, where it was thought by the people there were lots of wars, there was a lot of violence, a lot of barbarity, was not civilized. Anyone that came from these parts would have been viewed with a heck of a lot of suspicion by the Venetians. They were so used to seeing other white, powerful individuals. Anybody that didn't conform to that would be treated with fear, with suspicion. They'd be an outsider. They wouldn't have power. There was a very clear hierarchy of that power. It was inherited power. The wealthy in their families retained that wealth. It was passed on through generations. The women married off strategically in arranged marriages to ensure that wealth did stay in the family, that you were marrying an appropriate individual to carry you forwards with your life. So lots of structure, lots of devoutly Christian belief, a lot of piety then, a lot of control, oppression, and strong patriarchal leadership. So that is the scene that opens the play. So really interesting for Othello to open with that. And then just quickly to look at some of the other key points before we get onto the play. Our aim is to explore the whole play in 60 minutes. So we have got 55 of them left. So brace yourself, it's going to be quite a roller coaster of a ride. But other key themes, we need to know it's a tragedy. The play follows what we call the tragedy structure, which is where we have a hero who starts off really successful. There are highs and lows, but ultimately at the end, there is a downfall. The hero is undone by something, and usually that something is an event or an emotion or an experience that we can all relate to, so something quite universal. Also, of course, love is that key theme in the play, and we're looking at the different elements of love. Othello doesn't just give us your typical Elizabethan Jacobean love story. Oh, no, no, no. We've got lots of jealousy, we've got lots of passion, unconventional love. The central relationship, as we will see, between Desdemona and Othello shouldn't work within the Venetian society. It would have been scandalous. So it's really interesting to see how he challenges perhaps those views on love and adds his perspective, gives us something to get our teeth into. There's a lot on belief and religion as well, a lot of discussion of the soul, of what a Christian should be like, because of course the play opens in Venetian society, very Christian. And of course, for those watching Othello, so Shakespeare's audience in the Jacobean court would of course have been Christian as well. So really interesting to see how they would receive that Christian message, and then how we receive it today, how attitudes to women, to faith, to love change. And finally, just one more that I really want us to think about as we go through. Appearance versus reality. And by this I mean people at this time were very concerned with their appearance, of conforming to society, of being seen as that devout Christian pious figure, upholding those Venetian values. And then you've got this idea of reputation that's going to come up. Men wanted to be seen as strong and powerful, and so if their wife cuckolded them, and it's a really key word, so I'm going to explain it to you now, when a woman goes off and has an affair and everybody knows but her husband, so she's cheating on her husband, everybody knows except him, and that was the worst source of shame, that you couldn't control your wife. Remember, women were seen as those possessions, so for their wife to go and cuckold them was just shameful. It was horrific for the man. They didn't want it to happen. It would undermine their masculinity and their status. So really key ideas that we are going to explore in lots and lots of detail. I'm very excited to get started, and we're going to begin in Act 1. Okay, so copies at the ready, please. Get yourself ready. We're going to explore, and like I say, we've got about 10 minutes per act. So, time is money, as they say. We're going to give it a good whirl. And we do open in that stereotypical and traditional Venetian society, that Christian society of the 1600s. So what's going on? We've got that patriarchal, however you want to say it, society, which is spearheaded, if you like, by the character of Brabantio. He sort of represents the establishment. He represents those traditional views. He was very much ingrained in his gender views, that his daughter was seen as sort of a possession, who he would choose, who she marries. He was part of that typical Venetian class. There's lots on reputation and appearances. We don't see Othello, but he is discussed from the start. We've got Iago from the very start discussing him, already stirring that part. Plenty more on that to come. Christian Venice, name says it, it's deeply Christian, about that devotion, about purity, about following the customs, the expectations, if that's around marriage, if that's around sex, if that's around relationships, all being observed. Those women treated as those possessions to be married off, having a duty to their father, to their husband. Peace, it is peaceful, and peace is seen as key to civilization. Really interesting then when we switch to Act 2 and we see that war sweeping in. And there is a fear of the Muslim or African regions at the time. These were associated with violence. Anybody from these areas would be seen as an outsider, as being like barbarous. I can't say that word. As barbarous and seen in a fearful way. They're threatening the order of society. Remember, so deeply ingrained in the system of society and leadership that for somebody from outside, from these barbarous regions, to come in with their, their second-class status could disrupt the order of society, which is not what the Venetians wanted to happen. That us versus them mentality. So really interesting to open by looking at that patriarchal society, paternal love, if you like, and a fear of miscegenation. And this was a fear of crossbreeding, if you like, because as we said, there was very much this hierarchy which was dependent on who you married, who you were born into, which family you were born into. So you needed to keep that blue blood, keep it in the family, keep it going. And so when Iago says to Brabantio, you'll have an old black ram tupping your white ewe, that is very, very vivid, bold imagery. An old black ram, so Othello there being described as an old black ram, so very sort of powerful, barbaric, if you like, connotations, that he's this rough, dangerous, threatening force, tupping, so quite vivid imagery for sexual intercourse there, your white ewe, so the sheep are sort of submissive, passive, weak. White, of course, a key colour to symbolise purity, virginity, innocence. And that's where we can bring in our first critical quote for you, because let me just find it. Oh gosh. Oh yeah, Raymond Briggs. He said that blackness, so old black ram, was associated with the devil, evil doing, and death. So he said that blackness was associated with the devil, evil doing, and death. So instantly, just his skin colour is putting him as an outsider. One word should be coming to mind: racism. Okay, he goes on to say, you'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. They're referring to Othello's African roots. Horse, sort of quite uncontrollable, untamable. Barbary horse, referring to his heritage. And that he'd have his daughter covered. It shows that within a sexual relationship, the male takes the lead. So again, referring to the passivity, submissiveness, weakness of the character of Desdemona. He further says, your daughter and the Moor, this is where Othello is now called the Moor, which refers to his heritage. As an outsider, he's not called his name. He's seen as the Moor because he is defined as the outsider in this society. Your daughter and the Moor are now making the beast with two backs. So very vivid imagery being used by Iago there, talking about love in a very sexual sense, which sort of reduces it from that, that keeping up appearances, where you're expected to present yourself very well, to get into the nitty-gritty, animalistic imagery of sex. And for someone in Venetian society where we're keeping up that facade of, civility, to be reduced to an animalistic comparison would have been quite horrific. So Brabantio will not be happy about this. And he accuses Othello of stealing Desdemona. He just cannot believe that she would be with him. He says that she has fallen in love with what she feared to look on. So she's saying, my daughter feared people like Othello. She feared these rough, violent outsiders threatening our society. What's going on? He says he abused her delicate youth. So again, the passivity, submissiveness, weakness of females. He abused her delicate youth with drugs or materials. He says this cannot be natural. Brabantio says that their relationship, their supposed relationship, goes against all rules of nature. So this relationship for him is not natural. She just couldn't fall in love with him. He just can't understand it. And there we see him representing these very fixed, traditional, patriarchal views on love. It's not about falling in love with an individual. Love is more about controlled connections for the sake of your social position within that societal hierarchy. And he says, this is Brabantio, so really interesting character, Brabantio, and what he represents. He says that thou hast enchanted her, so she's not chosen this of her own will. And of course, really interesting because women didn't have choice, so that she would seemingly choose to go off with him. He can't comprehend, he can't quite get his head around it. So representing there this idea that this relationship shouldn't happen, it goes against all the norms, all the expectations. And Brabantio representing that Venetian society, representing those traditional views, very shocked and appalled by their relationship. And then we see Othello given a voice in the play. And he is an outsider, as we know, but with a difference. He is respected for his victory in battle. So whilst he is very much that outsider, his blackness separates him from others, he has respect because of his success in battle. And he's also a Christian. So he does have some role in this society, but very much still seen as that outside force. And one of the really interesting things he first says is, rude I am in my speech. So that suggests that he does not have much self-confidence in his articulation. Instead, he relies on his physical success in battle. And he tells us all about the reality of his relationship with Desdemona. He says, she'd come again and with a greedy ear devour up my discourse. So instead of Othello being the leader here, Desdemona is the leader. And for a woman in the society, scandalous, she should have been passive. She should have waited to have had an arranged marriage. Someone brought to her, it all arranged for her. But she'd come again and with a greedy ear devour up my discourse. So greedy and devour both semantically linked on that food. So she wants to hear from him. She wants to spend time with him. That consumption on her part. And he says, she loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. So she loved me for the story. So she devoured up his discourse. She listened to what he had to say. And she loved him for the dangers she had passed. Now, there is so much debate and discussion on this. Does that mean she is avoiding his skin colour, not looking at him as a person? Is she just in love with what he's done, with this idea of him, that she's got this strong man in her life? Hey, you go, girl. Or is it a genuine connection between them? She obviously doesn't love him for his money or his status, which maybe she would have been expected to do in her marital partner. Instead, it's what he's overcome, who he is, what his stories are. So really interesting pieces of information. And then we get Desdemona on the scene. Get her on the scene, because we've heard from Othello saying, well, no, I've not forced her into this. She came to me. Then we get Desdemona on the scene. And good heavens, so those Venetian attitudes to women are sort of turned on the head. She speaks out. She's very diplomatic. Women wouldn't have had a voice. They would have been expected to follow their father's command, do as they're told. But she comes into this court, this male-dominated setting, and she speaks. Perhaps that shows how passionately she feels about Othello. She can't let him go, if you like. She's got to speak up. And she says, I do here perceive a divided duty. So again, that central reference to the patriarchy, that the female daughter is bound, if you like, to the father, who then decides who to hand her over to. Like handing over the keys to a car or a house. She's sold, she's passed on from father to husband in that lineage without any rights or voice herself. She says to her father, to you I am bound for life and education. There's that patriarchy. She says, you are lord of all my duty. So that shows the sexist and oppressive status, if you like, that women have in this society. But then she says, but here's my husband. And from that line, from those words, things take a bit of a turn. She starts to actually speak up to commit herself to Othello. Now think about how this would have been received at the time, how it's maybe received by audiences now. She says that I did love them more to live with him. So it's not just some sort of fling. It's not just some sort of obsession with this strong man that's come in and telling these stories. She wants to live with him. Does that suggest they've got a lot in common? That they are, you know, compatible in some way? That they have got a bond and she wants to dedicate her life to him? Today, that's what we see marriage as, you know, sharing a life together with common interests. Is that what she's saying? She says, I saw Othello's visage or visage in his mind. She saw his face in his mind. So is she having to look beyond his skin colour, his ethnicity, to his mind, to his stories, to his greatness intellectually? Although he said, rude I am in speech. Is that true? Because you've impressed Desdemona with your stories, with what you've said. So really, are you right, Othello? And then she says, a moth of peace and he go to war. So Othello has been called upon, as we know, to go to war. And she says, a moth of peace and he go to war. She says, the rights of which I love him are bereft of me. And then she says, really, really key, this is a fab line, let me go with him. She is very, very strong. The use of that verb choice, let me go with him. She is speaking up for herself. She's saying what she wants to do. She wants to be with him. Now, is she being stupid? Is she being naive, thinking she can go off to war with him? Why on earth would she want to do that? Or is she demonstrating her commitment? She wants to live with him. She wants to be with him. She's genuinely in love with this man. Now, of course, Brabantio not happy about this. Sort of washes his hands. And he says, thank goodness I've not got any other children, for thy escape would teach me tyranny, he said. So the fact you've done this would make me treat my other children differently. I couldn't let this happen again. So really, really bold statements, declarations, assertions from Desdemona there. Committing herself, if you like, to Othello. And we see her commitment to him till the very end of the play. Not the same can be said of Othello, though. Spoiler alert. But we're going to move on to Act 2 now. So we've opened in Venice and now we're changing the scene. So Shakespeare is transporting his audience all the way to Cyprus. And we have to ask, what on earth have we got going on in Cyprus? What does Cyprus represent? Is it representing love, passion, war? It's in the middle of the ocean. It's even closer to those African Muslim nations that the Venetians feared. What's that telling us? So the action is now away from the safety and the civility of Venice. So we're now in Cyprus, and guess what? There has been a big storm. Desdemona has arrived first. Yes, she did actually go. Desdemona has arrived, and as she arrives, she gets a lot of praise from Cassio. And really, really evocative imagery given here. And he says about Othello, he has achieved a maid that paragons descriptions and wild fame. So really bigging up Desdemona. She paragons descriptions and wild fame. You can't describe it. She's that incredible. Whilst we're talking about a maid, really important to look at Desdemona. She's not got a job. She's quite literally a maid. She is a woman. And Reimer made a really interesting critical comment. He said, maidens of quality. So Desdemona has quality. Think about her father. Think about her status in society. Despite being a woman, because of her father, she does have a high status. Says, maidens of quality should not run away with blackamoors. So is that what Desdemona did? And how does that look to the Venetian society in which she was? But we've moved away now. But nice comment from Reimer. Try and drop that in if you can. He describes her as the divine Desdemona, giving her goddess-like qualities. He describes her as our great captain's captain. Really interesting. Does that suggest she's got a lot more power than we thought? She may not actually be the captain, but she's his captain. And Othello makes a really interesting assertion later on in the play. He says that she could lie by an emperor's side and command his tasks. So almost imagining the marital bed there and Desdemona having power through what she says over her husband, who then of course has the power. So is she really in charge? Has she got the power? Is she wearing those trousers, as we'd say in the 21st century? And he then says that she is the riches of the ship. Let her have your knees. Now, we're told that Cassio does all this because of his breeding. He says, it's my breeding which gives me such bold show of courtesy, so that he has been brought up to be so complimentary. But of course, Iago uses this to cause destruction and chaos and get to Othello. All that's to come. But the important thing here is, does this present Desdemona in a good way? Obviously, she's being complimented. But does it also highlight to us how much of an outsider she now is? So whilst Othello was the outsider in Venice, she is now the outsider in Cyprus because she's this woman and they're overwhelmed. She's a goddess. You know, you've got this woman arrived, all these men fighting, and here is this goddess-like divine character. So how does that make her stand out in Cyprus? And then fortunately, Othello does arrive. And she is described by him as my fair warrior. He arrives, he says, oh, my fair warrior. So warrior, the connotations of that word would maybe stereotypically be like a soldier, a fighter, someone brave, strong and confident. So for him to call her his warrior, a really interesting paradox, maybe, a contrast which challenges us, and it shows us the strength maybe of their relationship. And he says, oh, my soul's joy. Really nice quote. If I were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy. So if he died now, because he's reunited with Desdemona, they're together, you know, they're finally connected with each other, he will be most happy. Is this suggesting that our hero has peaked? This is as good as it gets. If I were to die now, would now to be most happy. From now on, because now we're in Cyprus, where we've got all this death, destruction, chaos, is it downhill? Is that structure of the play in action? We'll see, we'll see. And we're going to skip a bit now. So they're reunited, they're back together. Cassio's been very complimentary about her. And then Othello walks in on a brawl that's going on. There's plenty of, look, there's so much I could be telling you, but we've got 60 minutes to talk about love. So you get your play out, have a good read. We're going to talk about the important bits. And Othello walks in and he says, for Christian shame, put by this barbarous brawl, my blood begins, my safer guides to rule and passion. And what we are essentially seeing here is a change in Othello. We have left that Christian civilization, that calm civility behind. His blood, he says, begins my safer guides to rule. Passion, all this emotion is starting to be stirred within him. We might say, you know, he's getting a bit angry. This is quite a key turning point. So we've shifted the setting and there is this shift in the tone and the feelings of our key characters. And we see quite a bit about Cassio now. Because, and to cut a long story short, Iago has got Cassio drunk and then he started a fight with Montano. And this is what Othello's walked in on. And he's not happy. He shuts it down and he is sacking Cassio. And Cassio says, reputation, reputation, reputation. Oh, I have lost my reputation. I have lost the immortal part of myself. And what remains is bestyled. My reputation, Iago, my reputation. He is so, as you can tell, obsessed with his reputation, with his image, how people perceive him. And that is something we need to keep in mind as the play goes on. Is it that there is a fixation with how people perceive you? Again, that idea of cuckolding. Again, with Brabantio and the idea that his daughter could be with the Moor. That looks terrible, does it not? So is there a fixation with keeping up appearances, with position, with hierarchy, with conforming? And there's a fixation on this, a worry about this, what ends up causing destruction and driving people mad. As the play goes on, we're going to keep asking what's causing Othello's distress and unhappiness. Could this be the case, that there is this fixation with appearances, with presentation, with reputation, with status, and that is all a product of Venetian society drumming into you that you've got to look and act a certain way? And then we have some really interesting comments on Desdemona from Iago. He says, her eye must be fed, and what delight shall she have to look on the devil? So, good heavens, he's quite bold, is he not, in calling Othello the devil, a reminder there of course of Briggs and what the associations of blackness are. And he says, she first loved the Moor, but for bragging and telling fantastical lies. If she had been blessed, she would never have loved the Moor. So he's clearly not happy about this relationship. And so, like at the start when he was telling Brabantio, you know, you'll have your nephews neigh to you, you'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. He is still plotting away. He's still trying to destroy this relationship. If she had been blessed, she would never have loved him more. If she had truly had this position in society, if she had truly been this incredible woman with this position, she would not be with Othello. It just wouldn't happen, because she wouldn't be with the devil, the Moor. And he says her eye must be fed. So the idea here is that she will not be satisfied by being with him. He's not enough for her. So I want us to ask, what is Iago's motivation? Because when we're talking about love, it is clear he's trying to destroy the love, but also is his motivation love? We have the first idea that his wife, Emilia, has had an affair with Othello. Iago says that he has twixt my sheets. He says, it is thought abroad that he has twixt my sheets, that he's jumped into my position, into my bed. So the idea being here that Iago is jealous of Othello because he has gone off with his wife, Emilia. And he wants to know why, because of course Iago is from Venice, so he should have everything. Appearance-wise, he's everything. But then he's heard that Othello might have had an affair with his wife, and he wants to know why. Why would she go off with him? How dare he do this? So it's all about revenge, perhaps. He wants to get revenge on Othello for what he has done. And we've got some really interesting critical quotes on this. Neville Coghill said that psychologically, Iago is a slighted man, powerfully possessed by a hatred against a master who he thinks has kept him down. So it might be about promotion and position. Of course, Othello is at the top. Despite everything seemingly being against him, he's a Moor, he's an outsider in Venice, but he's got the power, he's at the top. Iago's jealous of that, perhaps. He is also described as the stage manager, controlling his victims effortlessly. Warren describes him as a stage manager controlling his victims effortlessly. And then there's some alternative interpretations. Could Iago's jealousy not be a jealousy of an affair? So he's twixt my sheets, he's jumped into my sheets, and he's gone off with my wife. How bad does that look for him? How undermined he feels he wants to get revenge by destroying Othello's relationship. He could, according to some critics, be eaten up with sexual jealousy. Ernest Jones said that Iago's jealousy comes from the homosexual foundations of which he didn't understand. So could Iago actually be in love with Othello? I mean, good heavens, so he's actually jealous of Desdemona, and he wants to get her out of the way so he can be with Othello. And some really interesting bits on that in Act 3, which we're coming on to. But could Iago be our gay lover in Othello? Good Lord. I've got no words. I've got no words. But different interpretations on what side of love is being shown by Iago. Is it evil? Is it evil? There's no love. Is it a jealousy, or is it lust? What could it be? And he is very clear that Desdemona and Othello are in love. He says in Act 2, his soul is so infettered to her love. He is so devoutly in love. But he can then destroy Othello by making him destroy her. So if he can turn Othello against Desdemona, he knows he's effectively turning Othello against himself. So that would suggest he's trying to get at Othello there. And he says at the end of Act 2, a very, very key line, out of her own goodness, make the net that shall enmesh them all. Now that would suggest that there is no love of any form on the part of Iago. It's pure evil. He's going to take her goodness and make the net that shall enmesh them all. He wants to destroy everybody. So that would suggest that he's a very selfish, evil, nasty man, if you like. It's in Act 3 that Desdemona commits to helping Cassio. Now, what is going on here? Of course, Iago's going to convince Othello that it's love and that she is having an affair. But what is she actually showing? Is she showing love for him? No, she's innocent. So what is it? Is it a love of friendship? Is it her kindness? Is it just the goodness of her, as Iago himself has conceded? Because Desdemona says, his bed shall seem a school, and she's talking about Othello, and she's going to convince him that Cassio is innocent, which of course, you know, he is. He's not done anything wrong, really. He's been set up by Iago. So the idea here could be that she's confident in her power over Othello, the mutual respect in their relationship, that she feels she can convince him and change his mind. His bed shall seem a school. She's going to speak out to him, so showing maybe an equality in their relationship. She says, I'll intermingle everything he does with Cassio's suit. Again, showing she's got this confidence that she can change Othello's mind. She can have an impact and an influence on her husband. So that idea that our great captain's captain, she is the driving force in their relationship, really, which challenges those traditional gender roles. And Othello says to her in Act 3, I will deny thee nothing. So that would again support that notion that she's got power in this relationship because of love. I will deny thee nothing, the strength and the power. But then Iago is planting that seed in Othello's mind about the potentiality of Desdemona having an affair. And this is really significant. Othello says to Iago, if thou dost love me, show me thy thought. If thou dost love me. Now, what sort of love is this? I don't think they're talking about being in love. Is this a sort of a friendship love? Remember, we're talking about love through the ages. That is not necessarily romantic love. That's one aspect of love, but then we've got that maternal love. We've got all these different branches of love. So what is the love being shown here? Is it about commitment? And is it about respect and friendship? So show me thy thoughts. So he wants to know. And Iago is starting to manipulate and plant those seeds. And always be keeping in mind, well, what is Iago's motivation here? And Iago says, good my lord, pardon me. Though I am bound to every act of duty, I am not bound to all that slaves are free to. So he's recognising he's got a commitment to Othello. He's got a duty to Othello in that hierarchy. But he's still playing games. And that's a really interesting thing about Iago. He's playing games. He's planting these seeds in Othello's mind. And again, we want to know what is his emotion and what is his motivation. W.H. Auden said that Iago is motivated by the desire to know and show what Othello is really like. Now that could tap into the idea that he feels that he has been cuckolded by Othello. It's rumoured abroad that he's twixt my sheets. People are talking about this man having slept with my wife, and he's so jealous and angry about it that he wants to get his own back and prove that he is not going to be defeated by Othello, that he won't stand for this. So he's trying to get back at him. But then, really interesting, they commit to each other. Iago says to Othello, I am your own forever. So basically we've had a lot of discussion and there has been this discussion that Desdemona is having some sort of affair with Cassio. And basically they commit to killing them both. Get rid of them. So they're committing to each other. And that suggests to us that Iago is getting Othello on side, getting Desdemona out of the way. I am your own forever. So is this a case of the homosexual foundation of which he didn't understand? And then we see Othello's descent. So he's sort of being convinced now by Iago that Desdemona is betraying him, cuckolding him, having an affair on him in some way. And he says, farewell tranquil mind, farewell content, farewell the plumed troops. So this idea that once we're in Cyprus now, everything is going down. We're on this descent. But he's still putting up a fight. He's not fully convinced that Iago is telling him the truth. Now, this can show Othello's commitment to Desdemona, because Iago is telling him these things, but he's not fully believing them. He says, well, she had eyes and chose me. He said, for she had eyes and chose me. So he's aware that he was chosen by Desdemona. That idea from Rhymer, maidens of quality should not run away with black Moors. It wasn't an arranged agreement. It wasn't about social position. It was about who he was as an individual. I saw his visage in his mind. She would devour up my discourse. I did love the Moor to live with him. This idea of choosing to be with him out of love. So is this about authentic, genuine love between Othello and Desdemona? And he says, I do not think but Desdemona's honest. So he's putting up a fight against what Iago is saying. He's saying, hang on, I do not think but Desdemona's honest. However, what about the syntax here? I do not think but Desdemona's honest. He's saying something positive about her. He's essentially saying, I think Desdemona's honest. But look at how he says it. I do not think but Desdemona's honest. So the double negation, the negative syntax structure, is suggesting to us doubts in his mind. So it's showing to us that the ideas have been planted in his mind, that doubting and that uncertainty is starting to grow. And then Iago replies to that, long live she so, and long live you to think so. So he is very aware that as soon as Othello does not think Desdemona is being honest, that's it. Show's over. He will be going off the rails. And a key quote you need to know is that Othello says, I do love thee, and when I love thee not, chaos is come again. That's what he said to Desdemona earlier in the play. I do love thee, and when I love thee not, chaos is come again. Now the suggestion there, like Iago says, long live she so, and long live you to think so. Once that love is gone, when that trust is gone, it is going to turn into something else. And it's almost like the two sides of love. They've got this really passionate, authentic love, which is naturally there. It's just happened. It's not controlled in any way. They can't control it. It's this really deep, genuine love. But on the flip side of that, if that were to go, if this passion were to convert into something negative, that would be destruction. So whilst it's the best kind of love, it will become the worst kind of anger, hatred, passion, envy, murder. It becomes such a negative force because it is such a positive force, transcending all those physical restraints, that if it were to go sour, if things were to go bad, it would be explosive. And Iago is very aware of that, so he knows if he can convince Othello, he can cause his destruction and his downfall. But Iago is still being challenged by Othello. He's saying, oh, she's, watch her well with Cassio if you have eyes to see. He's saying, just you look at what's going on. And Othello says, villain, be sure thou prove my love a whore. Be sure of it. So repetition. Give me the ocular proof. He's demanding proof. He's not going to take his word for it. So maybe he doesn't fully trust Iago, at least at the moment. He says, thou hast been better, have been born a dog, than answer my wicked wrath. So it would be better if you'd been born as some little animal than have to face my anger if you're making this up. So he's really warning him now that if he is making this up, if he's making him so angry and he's got no proof, it is a lie, just you watch out because I will explode. So there again, we're seeing that Othello, maybe he didn't fit into civilized Venice, because we're seeing quite an angry, threatening, powerful, physically man. He's going off the rails. Farewell, tranquil mind. He is an explosive character, and his love going to, work him up. And then, the killer is 2 points. We talk about the handkerchief, key symbolism. Make sure you have a look at that. We've not got time. We're doing 60 minutes, sorry. But do have a look at that if you've got the time. The symbolism of the handkerchief, very important. And then, Iago uses the same imagery he used against Brabantio to attack Othello. He says, behold her tops. He says to Othello, behold her top. So imagine Cassio sleeping with her. And that's it. That is the changing point. This idea that Othello could be being cuckolded by Desdemona is the worst thing he can think of. Again, this idea of reputation, of status. And really interesting point from Marion Cox. She said men wished to marry virgins. Men wished to marry virgins. So the idea being here that he wants somebody who is sexually pure, who is a virgin. That is part of what masculinity is, wanting someone that's not slept with anybody before. That was the thing at the time. So again, this idea of sex, betrayal, adultery being a key source of anger in this play. And there you have it, your love links, because you've got that commitment of the love, and then on the flip side, the anger created when there is unfaithfulness, when there is betrayal. And of course, within Christian Venice, an affair would have been scandalous. It was not what happened. There was going to be complete loyalty and commitment on the woman's part as that possession, if you like. And this idea that she has slept with Cassio, that she's having an affair right under his nose, he's the laughing stock of flipping Cyprus, is fuming. He says, damn her lewd minx, damn her, damn her. So we really see a change, you know. Oh, my fair warrior, if I were to die now, 'twere now to be most happy. Oh, my soul's joy, damn her lewd minx, damn her, damn her. Look at the change that's occurred, and basically it's due to what Iago is telling him, that is Othello very weak because he is believing this. F.R. Leavis said that Othello is completely flawed. Is he being undermined? Is Othello very insecure? He thinks he's not good enough for Desdemona because he is the outsider. Brabantio didn't want him to marry her. So is he being very insecure and going, damn her, lewd minx, damn her, damn her? He's believing it. And look at how his approach to her has changed. A really key character in Act 3 I just want to talk about is Emilia. And she is like our 1600s, 17th century feminist. She is not taking it. And of course, rumour has it that she has had an affair with Othello. Scandal. You go, girl. And she says of men, well, first of all, she says to Iago, he has got her to get the handkerchief. And she says, do not chide, I have a thing for you. And he makes a joke of it. He goes, a thing, a common thing. Makes a little joke. And she says later on about men, they are all but stomachs and we all but food. They eat us hungrily, and when they are full, they belch us. I know, really, really evocative imagery. They are all but stomachs, we are all but food. They eat us hungrily, and when they are full, they belch us. So she's speaking out against men. She's a very strong female, questioning men, and saying, well, hang on, look at these men. They just think they can eat us up and then belch us. They can pick us up, have a bit of fun, and drop us. And she's speaking out about that. So is she challenging those gender stereotypes of women? Is she giving a strong voice? Has Iago met his match in Emilia? That is my question to you. And how does that affect their loving relationship? And she's also got some really interesting thoughts on jealousy. Because, of course, the whole point of what Iago is doing is to make Othello jealous, because he knows if he can turn that love into jealousy and then create that anger, he can destroy both Othello and Desdemona. And Iago describes jealousy as the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. So the idea, if he can create a jealous state in Othello, it will destroy him. So is that what Iago's motivation is to do? And Emilia gives Desdemona some very wise words. She says, jealous souls will not be answered to. They are not ever jealous for the cause. It is a monster. So the idea that jealousy is this awful, awful emotion. And is that the key example of love in this play? How jealousy can become such a destructive force if you allow it to. Could well be. And she's speaking to Othello because Othello comes to her and wants to know about Desdemona. And he said, you know, have you seen her with so-and-so? Have you seen her with Cassio? Have you noticed anything? She says, if any wretch have put this in your head, let heaven requite it with the serpent's curse. She says this in Act 4. So she wants him to get this idea out of his head because she knows how destructive it is. She says, the more's abused by some villainous knave. Somebody has abused him, has taken advantage of him, and is planting those ideas in his head. Little does she know it's her own husband that's done it. And Desdemona says in Act 3, my lord is not my lord, nor should I know him. So she has noticed this change. And then again, this conversation on jealousy she's had with Emilia, our feminist character. She is our strong female individual in Cyprus, spearheading it for the girls. And she is discussing this with Desdemona. And Desdemona says, heaven keep that monster, jealousy, from Othello's mind. And just whilst we're talking about jealousy, the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on, it is described as an unbookish jealousy. Iago again talking. He's the one that says it's unbookish, it's unwise. So he knows he's made this all up, he's caused all this, he's done all this destructive behaviour. And he's quite happy with himself for it. Let's be honest, it's an unbookish jealousy. So Othello, is he a flawed character? Is he completely flawed? Like Levi said, that he's just believed this and he's let it turn him into this mad, wild individual, as we're going to see as the play goes on. And whilst we're talking about women, on one hand we've got the very strong Emilia, our feminist, and as we'll see in Act 5, she speaks out, she speaks up against her husband, against Othello. We've also got Bianca, and she is our key individual of Act 4. We get a lot about Bianca in Act 4, because Cassio says in Act 4 of Bianca, hither comes the bauble. She is described as a bauble, so again reverting to this idea of women as possessions, as second-class citizens, as just like window dressing, without really any intellect, anything to give. They were seen as those possessions with that lower place in society. And Bianca's class, she's described as a whore by Emilia a little bit later on, I believe. I'll just check that as we get there. So much about status and position in society and role, and how that influences love. But on Act 4, quickly, there is a discussion of affairs. They're talking about what would you do if your partner had an affair. So let's see what they say, shall we? Let's get ourselves to Act 4. Remember in the exam, try and make sure you've got a selection of quotes from across the text. And you're just dropping them in as little sound bites as opposed to quoting large chunks of text. But in Act 4, they're discussing, we join the discussion about affairs, and Othello says, naked in bed, Iago, and not mean harm, because Iago has said, or to be naked with her friend in bed, an hour or more, not meaning any harm. So you say, well, they could just be naked in bed together, and he says, it is hypocrisy against the devil. That is what Othello says. He says that they mean virtuously, and yet so, the devil their virtue tempts, and they tempt heaven. So they're discussing an affair, what's acceptable, this idea of cuckolding coming up again, of the role of women, of commitment, of faithfulness in love. Really key ideas. And then more discussion on that handkerchief. That's page 167 if you share my copy of the text. And we then have Bianca as our character. She's described by Iago as a housewife that by selling her desires buys herself bread and clothes. So perhaps that presentation of that prostitute in the piece. And so, as we see Othello descending further at the command, if you like, of Iago, who is manipulating him in this way, we see Othello then fall into a trance. So this shows us just how powerful Iago's efforts and work have been in affecting poor Othello. He says, lie with her, lie on her. We say lie on her when we belie her. Lie with her, zounds, that's fulsome. Handkerchief, confessions, handkerchiefs, to confess and be hanged for this labour. First to be hanged and then to confess, I tremble at it. Nature would not invest herself in shadowing passion without some instruction. It is not words that shape me thus, pish, noises, ears and lips. It's possible, confess, handkerchief, oh devil. And then he falls in a trance, and it's really interesting because whilst we've got Iago standing there, he knows Othello is in a trance, and he says, work on, my medicine, work. Thus credulous fools are caught, and many worthy and chaste dames even thus are guiltless meet reproach. What ho, my lord, I say, Othello. And then Cassio enters. So during that moment, he says that in this way, 2 trusting people are tricked, trapped, and many sexually virtuous women are wrongfully accused. And in that, he concedes to himself what he's doing is wrong, and he recognises the effect that he's had on Othello, who's too trusting, and how he has blamed somebody who is sexually virtuous. So showing the awful hatred, he is complete opposite of what love is, we could argue, Iago, in how awful he's being. And Iago says, there's many a beast then in a populous city, and many a civil monster. Now we know Iago has come from civilised Venice. Is he essentially our civilised monster? We've seen Othello presented by Venetian society as this threat. Is the threat actually from within? Is the threat Iago, the Venetian? So we've got lots and lots of questions to ask, lots of challenges being presented to us by Shakespeare. And then Iago says, as he shall smile, Othello shall go mad. So as he sees Cassio happy, it will make Othello mad and angry because of jealousy, hatred, rivalry, bitterness. And then Othello makes a very bold declaration. Iago continues to convince him. This is what it's about, for all the physical strength Othello has, Iago is undoing him, if that's even a word, is getting to him through words alone. What does this say? Does this support Leibus's conclusion that Othello is completely flawed? And Othello says, A, let her rot and perish and be damned tonight, for she shall not live. My heart is turned to stone. So in those words, he decides he's going to kill her. So we have gone from this devout love and devotion to murderous, a massive contrast. He says, my heart is turned to stone. So does that symbolise his love for her ceasing? Although we find out later he's still in love with her, and that is his justification for killing her. But my heart is turned to stone. Really famous quote, perhaps symbolising the change that has come over him. And he says, oh, the world hath not a sweeter creature that she might lie by an emperor's side and command his task. So conceding that she's sweet. So he's saying, I'm going to kill her, my heart's turned to stone, but I still think she's sweet. So real juxtaposition showing the turmoil in Othello. This is the downfall of our tragic hero. And he then says, I will chop her into messes, cuckold me. So again, that cuckolding, that idea of his reputation as being the motivator for what he's going to do to poor Desdemona. I will chop her into messes. Very vivid, very angry, very bold from Othello there. And then Iago's like, don't poison her. Strangle her in bed. So he wants it to be something that's going to destroy Othello. So the idea, his soul is so enfetered to her love. So if he is the one that actually kills her, he has to do it, he's going to destroy him as well. So Iago's mentality, we could argue, is that by making Othello kill Desdemona, he will ultimately kill himself. Because they are so deeply in love that by doing that, it would destroy him. So we've then got a really key scene towards the end of Act 4 when we see Othello strike Desdemona. Now, he's called her his fair warrior. He's given her all this glowing praise. And now we see a real change because he not strangles her. Not yet. He strikes her. And you need to be asking, what would the audience of the time be thinking? So what would they be thinking in the court of James I? And how would the characters in the play be thinking? How would this news be received in Venice? How is it acted on in Cyprus? And how do we as the modern audience see it? You know, can it be justified? Where is the love? We're talking about love. Where is the love? He strikes her. He says, devil. She says, I have not deserved this. He says, out of my sight. She says, I will not stay to offend you. So again, he is not treating her as an equal now. Out of my sight. He is commanding her with imperatives, showing that lack of love, or that reverting to the patriarchal society which they seemingly transcended. Their love was all about romance and about connection. He's reverted to those traditional gender roles and those highly structured expectations of what a man and a woman should do and be like. Calling her a devil, the religious metaphysical imagery. Nice chance to bring in a John Bailey quote which challenges that. John Bailey said, she is going to heaven and he is going to hell. Remember, he is the one that's always been presented as the devil in terms of the blackness and that racist connotations in Venetian society. So what is that saying to us? And it's through Ludovico that we see the shock at what's happened. He's saying this would not be believed in Venice. Nobody can believe what's happened to Othello. He is so much changed. Is it this anger, this bitterness, this jealousy, all caused by Iago's words, that's made him become undone, that's really got to him and destroyed him? Leave this, Othello is completely flawed. Look what Iago's been able to do to him. And then a little bit later on, we see Othello treating Desdemona as if she were a prostitute. He says, what art thou? And she says, your wife, my lord, your true and loyal wife. So she remains so devoutly committed to him through it all. What does that say about her in contrast to him? And he says, are you not a strumpet? So are you not a prostitute? Are you not a whore? And she says, no, as I am a Christian, if to preserve this vessel for my Lord. So if we're talking about love, really nice quote about the context there, and Christianity and that idea of no sex before marriage, you've got to preserve. Sorry, just doing my button up, don't know why it's come undone. Got a bit excited, have we not, talking about all of this? So Desdemona demonstrating that classic Christian Venetian role. I am a Christian, I'm preserving this vessel, the body as a vessel for my Lord, preserving it for you. So that idea, men wish to marry virgins, Marion Cox, she's showing commitment, she's showing an adherence to those Christian ideals and expectations. And he replies to this, I took you for that cunning whore of Venice that married with Othello. And he deepens the religious imagery. He says, you mistress that have the opposite office to St. Peter and keep the gate of hell. So he's now saying, you're going to hell. You have committed adultery. You are a cunning whore. This language is a massive contrast, a massive contrast to the language that was used before by them. We are seeing a completely different Othello. Really shocking. This bold religious imagery, condemning her to hell, saying she's not pure, she's not virginal, and that she's not a virgin. Marion Cox, men wish to marry virgins. He doesn't think she is one. He's not happy. He feels undermined. He feels betrayed. He feels angry. He feels jealous. He is fuming. And then let's quickly just note that that's about life after death, beliefs on heaven and hell, the Christian concept of this play, and the beliefs on the soul, really key. And then let's just go into Act 5 now. We see in this act, I said it a bit earlier, Emilia calls Bianca a whore, a strumpet. Bianca retorts back, I am no strumpet. So these attitudes to women, even between women of different, from different places, of different classes, of different beliefs. Excuse me. And we see Rodrigo describe Iago as a dog, an inhuman dog. This is a very common image that we're receiving about Iago, that he is a dog. So what are the connotations of that? What would that mean to the audience in the court of James I? What does that mean to us now? You know, are people starting to see his true colours? And then we see the scene where Othello finally decides he's going to kill Desdemona. And he says, she must die, else she'll betray more men. So is his justification, in his mind at least, for killing her, that he's got to do it? It's a duty he's got to do, because otherwise she'll betray more men. And he says, put out the light. So the idea that he knows he's extinguishing her, and that light symbolising maybe hope for the future, put out the light, the hope of their future together, of him being restored to his former glory, contentment, happiness, is going. And he says, "O balmy breath that dost almost persuade justice to break her sword." So he's right there ready to strangle her, over her, and he can't do it. You know, this balmy breath, he's being enchanted by her once again, he's falling in love with her. Again, he can't do it. But of course, yes, she must die or she'll betray more men. He's got to put out that light. It's going to be catastrophic. And he says, "I will kill thee and love thee after." So you know how I said maybe that love's gone? This suggests otherwise he's still in love with her, but he feels, because of what Iago said, because of now what's in his mindset, and this idea of cuckolding, of, you know, loyalty, commitment, duty, he feels he has no option but to kill her. Kill her and love thee after. It's delusional that the only way he can have her and keep her to himself, keep it on love here, is by killing her, and then he can love her. That's the only way he can ensure she stays loyal. But then she wakes up, so he can't. She's awake, and he takes this as an opportunity, still going to do it, takes it as an opportunity to ensure she's got a pure soul. And we've been talking about soul, and he says, "If you bethink yourself of any crime, unreconciled as yet to heaven and grace, solicit for it straight." He says, "I would not kill thy unprepared spirit. I would not kill thy soul." Does this prove he still loves her? He cannot bear to think that he could send her to hell. She is going to heaven, he is going to hell. John Bailey is a form of self-destruction, but he still wants to protect her. He's still in love with her. He cannot kill her unprepared spirit. He cannot afford for her to go to an afterlife and be condemned to hell. He wants the best for her. He's still in love with her. He's still besotted with her, but he still feels he's got to kill her. It's a real contrast, juxtapositions. And time is slipping away. He then says, "It is too late," and she's bargaining. She's like, "Just give me an hour. Give me a bit of time. Give me half an hour. Give me a minute." It is too late. He smothers her. And then, guess who bursts in? You know who comes in. It's Emilia. Our strong, formidable female is back. And she is furious. She knows what's happened. She calls Othello the blacker devil. And then Othello realises that Desdemona is still alive. And Emilia is there, and she's like, "What's happened? What's gone on?" And Desdemona says, "A guiltless death I die. Commend me to my kind lord." So she remains loyal even to her murderer to the very end. That example of Christian devotion, of Christian duty, of women in this time being so committed. Maybe she's still so in love, so he's even killed her, and she still loves him. What does that tell us about love? Is it just simply ludicrous? Should she be speaking out? Is it an example of her being weak, oppressed, suppressed? You know, what do you think? A guiltless death I die? Well, no, you don't. He's just killed you. Commend me to my kind lord. Is she talking about God? Is she talking about Othello? A bit of ambiguity there, up for discussion. Emilia then calls Othello the blacker devil, and she's asserting herself as a woman. She's got a voice. You know, this goes against our expectations, of course. And she says, "The Moor has killed my mistress. Murder, murder." She is speaking out, so maybe showing her love and commitment for Desdemona. A different kind of love again, about commitment to a friend, of somebody she truly believes in, who she thinks means well. She wants to devote her life to in that platonic way. And she says to Othello, "Do thy worst." So she will not be limited by that patriarchal society. She will not be limited by their gender roles. Do thy worst. And then we're skipping a bit. We're over our hour. I'm rushing us. Time is money. She says to Iago, it all comes out that Iago has made it all up. And she says, "You told a lie, an odious, wicked, damned lie upon my soul." She says, he says to her, "Be quiet, go home." So again, that gender presentation. She says, "I will not charm my tongue. I am bound to speak." You go, girl. She is bold. She speaks when she goes, "My mistress here lies murdered in her bed." So Emilia, as this strong, formidable woman standing up to these men, it is, you know, a feminist's dream, if you like. And Othello says about Desdemona, he says, "She's like a liar gone to burning hell." So again, this metaphysical imagery returns, but he wanted her soul to be forgiven and go to heaven. Bailey says he's the one going to hell, she is going to heaven. And then we've seen Desdemona killed by a man, smothered by a man, looted by a man. And now Emilia is killed by a man because Iago kills Emilia. So 2 men killing their wives. What does that actually tell us about gender representation in this play at the end? But after she's killed, she says, oh, lay me by my mistress's side. Look at that commitment for you. Look at that platonic love and that genuine loyalty that she has, that devotion, that commitment. And then Othello has what we call his final soliloquy. And it's a moment for him when he starts to realise what he's actually done and how he has been deceived and how, you know, he's realised what Iago has done and how he's been undone and destroyed. And T.S. Eliot said that there is the terrible exposure of human weakness. That's what he said about the last great speech of Othello. It is the terrible exposure of universal human weakness. So we said it's a very relatable play that Shakespeare's written. We can all relate to this universal human weakness. And Othello asks that people will speak of one that loved not wisely. So he recognises he was not wise in his love, but too well. So this idea that this jealousy and anger that's come of it is as a result of loving too well. He loved her too much that Iago was able to use her, you know, like blinded by love, to use that to then undo him and to destroy him. So the idea that he loved so much that then became such a destructive force. So the 2 sides of love being presented by Othello here. And he says, of one not easily jealous. So he tries to claim that he's not easily jealous. So is he showing that he's completely flawed? As Lever said, he's got no understanding of what's happened. He's got no real insight because, look, you clearly were jealous because look what happened to you. You became this depraved monster. That monster took over your mind. And he said that he was instead perplexed in the extreme. So he was pushed to the extreme. He could not cope with it because of Iago's actions. And then he says that he threw a pearl away. So he describes Desdemona as a pearl. So that connotation of a pearl of being precious, of being rare, of being unique, of being prized, to be looked after and conserved. And he's thrown that away. So it's careless, thoughtless action that has done this. And then he says, kills himself, he says, to die upon a kiss. So by the end of this play, we have got death of our main couple, poor Emilia. You know, everybody is in a very bad way. It's genuinely a tragedy, except Iago. He is stood there alive at the end of this play. His plan has worked. It's all come together. He has been the stage manager, controlling his victims effortlessly, as Warren said. He has let this plan, it's come to life. It's happened, and out of her own goodness, he's made the net which will enmesh them all. He's brought about this horrific destruction. How do we feel? You know, how shocking that he's been able to get away with it. But is Iago happy, and what's his emotion? Does he have any love? Is there any love there? Or have the true lovers have been killed by love? Is that what love does to you? Because now we've read the play, well, we've skim-read the play in an hour, we've looked at key bits from the play, we've got to now ask, what is Shakespeare's message? You know, how strong is love? Does love eventually kill you? Is that how strong of a force it is? What is authentic love? Is authentic love all about those societal conformities, those customs, those expectations, that Christian civilization and control? Or is love about something more that transcends life? And look at what love can do. Extreme emotion, passionate love. Look at the flip side of that. Look at what happens. But we're asking, do we blame Othello? You know, does he become an awful criminal and character in our minds because of what he did? Or do we feel sorry for him? Is he our hero, sharing in that experience of jealousy which all of humanity has to battle with from true love? Because out of true love becomes grows that monster which is jealousy. We can all relate to that. Is that Shakespeare's message? We've all got to protect ourselves from jealousy. We can't get too caught up in what our reputation is. You know, that reputation image, that idea of being cuckolded, becoming so caught up in that and what other people are doing and saying. And how women and the role of women, Desdemona, she stays so loyal till the end. Then you've got Emilia, who tries to speak out, and she's bold and she's a revolutionary. Both the women are killed. So what is Shakespeare's commentary there? What's he saying about society and about how people are and how people interact? So lots and lots quotes, it really did come into birth. He said, that I do love thee, and when I love thee not, chaos is come again. Look at what happened when that love went. But did that love ever die, or was it love or a distortion of love which brought about the downfall of our two principal characters? And Iago knew that by destroying Desdemona, Othello would be destroying himself, because he is so in love with her, that he is so infettered to her love. So this commitment between them, this strong commitment that ended up being used against them. But there is so much now to take a step back and to think about, to be thinking about what the critics were saying, to be thinking about what the context of this play tells us about women, gender, power, about love, about the structures in society, and what is Shakespeare's message for us to take away on the subject of love. Thank you so much for your company. I am sorry that it has been quite a whirlwind and a little bit bitty and all over the place, but hopefully you can take a little something from this. Make sure you do get back to your copy of the play, get those annotations going, and keep in mind at all times your context. Keep in mind, what is Shakespeare saying about love, and keep in mind your key quotes. How is he using language to present this message? I'm Ben Wardle. You can follow me on Twitter at BenWardleUK. You can follow me on Instagram, BenWardle_. You can read my writing for the Huffington Post at huffingtonpost.co.uk/Ben-Wardle. Thank you very much for your company. It has been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day and very best of luck in the exam. Do take care.